start by asking you to say your full name?
Yes, it's Yoshio Nakamura.
And can you tell me what unit you served in?
I was in the M Company of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in the 3rd Battalion.
And can you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Rosemead, California, and in June 30th, 1925.
And did you grow up in California as well?
Yes, I did. I grew up in my first my first years were in Rosemead. I went through the elementary school through the 6th grade, and we had to move to El Monte. So I enrolled in a school, in elementary school, the 7th and 8th grades in El Monte, and then went to El Monte Union High School.
Can you tell me about your growing up years and the types of things that you would do for fun as a child?
Well, I grew up on a farm, so some of it was doing some work, pulling weeds and things like that. For fun, I used to ride my bicycle around and enjoyed going to a river and seeing the fish in there and birds and things of nature. And we used to play with the kids around our neighborhood. And I just recall that we did some foolish things, like we dig a hole and create some tunnels underneath the ground and go in there. And it just occurred to me that it could have collapsed and no one would know we're there. So, but things that most young people did, play marbles, and talk, made up stories and things to entertain ourselves. But anyway, I don't remember too much about it. And I had plenty to do, and I was a very serious student, so I had a lot of homework. And I'd say that it was a pretty happy life for me as a young guy.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I had an older brother. He was 9 years older, and then I had a sister who was just a year younger, and a brother who was 4 years younger. We lost our mother when I was almost 6 years old. So my father was a single parent, and he tried to keep us together, and we all had to pitch in. So our life was not the usual type of mother and father and children.
And did any of your siblings serve during the war as well?
Excuse me?
Did your siblings serve during the war as well?
No, my brother, older brother, he was my mentor in many ways. He had a very strong work ethic and had a tremendous amount of integrity. So he was a very good role model for me. But he had a hearing problem. 1 year you couldn't hear from 1 year, and So uh, I don't think that it ever occurred to him to be in the armed forces because he would not qualify. His hearing was so poor. My sister probably is the most active in the area of sports in the family, and my younger brother, uh, he eventually played basketball and he he's a pretty good athlete. We were not very big people, so in terms of class A, B, C, being varsity, junior varsity, we're down to about the C level because I probably didn't weigh more than 110 pounds if I was lucky to be that heavy.
Did your father serve during the First World War?
Well, my father was born in Japan, and he left his family when he was only 16. And so he was a pretty adventurous guy, just took off. And uh, in Japan, where he was born, the eldest son usually inherited all the property and everything. And so he wasn't the oldest, so heck, he decided he'll go find some adventure himself. So that's why he came to the United States, and I think he probably landed in Hawaii for a while, and then he worked up and down the coast and ended up in Southern California.
Can you tell me about the struggles that your family faced during the Great Depression?
Well, yes, it was a very hard time for everyone. And fortunately, we had a farm, and so we grew our own food. So we were never short on that score. But it was a very tough time for everyone. And I'd say that we just struggled through. Uh, that's what I remember, that we all had to pitch in and struggled through the depression. Uh, Fortunately, when, my father had a truck with which to deliver or the vegetables that he grew, and he would go from store to store and make deliveries of people who wanted beets or broccoli, turnips, radishes, whatever it is that we had. And so in that sense, most people had to have vegetables too. So uh, we had enough to survive.
So on December 7th, 1941, how did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Well, I'll say that I was in the 11th grade at El Monte Union High School at the time. And a neighbor came over to tell me that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I was thinking that Japan in terms of size, was about the size of California and didn't have too many natural resources. And it seemed like a pretty foolish thing for them to attack a big giant like the US. And what happened is that the giant woke up, and at that time, there wasn't much interest or desire for the United States to join Britain and others fighting the Nazis in Germany, so or in Europe. And so and I thought that it would seem to be not a very smart move, but militarily, they did destroy a number of ships in Pearl Harbor and whipped up a lot of hysteria because, uh, you know, people could imagine the Japanese fleet trying to attack the continental United States. So it was a very, very traumatic time for all of us, and especially for Americans of Japanese ancestry, because well, quite a few people, and especially the press, the politicians, the media, newspapers, tried to paint us all into with one brush. So they couldn't distinguish between us who had Japanese faces but American hearts, and those who were in Japan. And so uh, we had a big struggle with our own identity as Americans. So I would say that it turned our lives upside down. And fortunately, there are many, many people who knew that we're Americans and that and they treated us as American citizens. So and some who went out of their way to help us, and knowing that some of the things that the government was doing was wrong. And so the attack occurred at December 7th, 1941. On February 19, 1942, with the war hysteria looming all over the country, and especially on the West Coast, the newspapers, especially the Hearst newspapers, are just really wanted to terrify, I think, everyone. And so they painted us with the same brush as the Imperial Japanese forces. And so it made it pretty tough on us. And on February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt signed an executive order 9066 authorizing the Western Defense Command to put us into camps, concentration camps. So we were rounded up and we went to different initial assembly centers. In my case, my neighbors and friends took our family to Pasadena to board a train, and we had to dispose of all our property. It was a terrible time for many people, because you can only take what you can carry, and there was no charge that was made against us, except that we looked like the enemy. So I would say that one big lesson that we all learned, and some of us in later times, is that you should not be accusing people of wrongdoing when you have no evidence to show that you were responsible. And that's what happened to us.